Greetings, beloveds, as we go into the last couple seconds for the trading month of August 2025. Market's about to close here. This is going to be the last trading day for the month of August. Let's take a look here, a couple seconds before the end of, and there's the bell right there. Let's take a look here where BTC is trading. And you can see BTC for the day is down about 3.8%. Let's take a look at the summary for the week and for the month. So these are the numbers. We can see that for the month, US markets are slightly higher. The Dow was up the most for the month of August, about 3%. And we can see that BTC for the week is down 4%. And for the month is down 6.4%. US markets for this week slightly unchanged, but a little bit to the downside. Let's take a look at those charts. Let's begin by taking a look at the 5-minute chart for the SPX. And if you take a look at this top side line, it's a simple line. You can see at some point during the highs of this week, in fact, where we touched all-time highs, I believe that was yesterday or early this morning. I believe early this morning at the open. So right there, double top was confirmed and we pulled back since. And then there's another line which in the short term is offering resistance. If it's a prior, if I just do it like that, you can see that we are struggling to hold above the line. We haven't recaptured the level above the line. So there's still resistance as long as we're below this line here. Anything below this level means that even short term, the markets are 5-minute to 5-minute sideways to down. But remember, this is small time frame. It could change even on Monday, or on Tuesday or on Wednesday. Now, the Nasdaq daily is showing that we have yet to break. If you take the price channel lows, we can see we are touching the lows of this trend line as of today, the end of trading for August. And also that has yet to break. And even if it were to break, let's say it breaks here, remember we have the potential for support, or at least the market considering whether it's going to find support at the upward sloping 50-day moving average. Even with the break of this trend line, there's still it can still come back and find support around the 50-day moving average. So really, we can't say the market is broken. If you take a look at the daily, the RSI connect the lows, we have yet to break this line. And there's also another line coming from the prior highs. In fact, let me change colors there. So there's another line. This breakout here began this move. And of course, we haven't come back to that level yet. So, but take that line and extend it. You can see how the market has used this line before. If for those of you who are aware, this is something I talk about during my weekend market analysis for subscribers. So we have yet to break below that line also. So we have the blue and the black line that could eventually offer support. And let's say a scenario where we come back and test either of these lines and coil up, then that means that we are going to record fresh highs. Now, a true sell-off will begin if and when we break below these two lines. And that has yet to happen. It's another way of saying that a true sell-off will begin if and when we break below the 200-day, the 50-day moving average. S&P 500, we see the S&P 500 daily making fresh all-time highs, but this is coming with a decline of the RSI. So usually that tends to be the beginning of running out of energy. So that's something we have to continue monitoring day to day. But also remember, just like the Nasdaq on the daily for the S&P 500, we have the potential for support on this simple line connecting recent lows. So in a way, we can say we are wedging, and either we get a breakout above this range to take things even higher, or over time, we end up breaking below this wedge on the RSI and we start seeing it coiling down. But again, even remember here for the S&P 500, institutions are still going to view the 50-day moving average as the line on the sand, as to whether they want to stay long the market or whether they want to peel off some of the positions. So there's some potential for support even with pullbacks based on what I'm looking at. Now for weeks, we saw the Dow was struggling to break out, but we can say that it did manage to close at all-time weekly closing highs last week. This is a 2-year weekly. And so the Dow did finally break out, catching up with the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. But the Dow continues to offer this line of potential resistance, something I've talked about for a couple of weeks. So we have yet to clear this line here definitively, and also happens to be an area where we come back to test where we broke down. So to understand this is to understand my concept, which I call the uniformity concept. We broke down here for this pullback. This was a warning drop. Now, if you understand how to read that, you take that break point and extend it out like that. So the black line. Notice how the black line was instrumental in giving us this sell signal here. As the Dow was trying to break out, the price breakout did not take place. So there was a price breakout rejection. Ultimately, we get this bigger pullback here, or a sell-off. Now, if you follow those two lines, you'll see that right now we're exactly tagging these lines. We haven't cleared them. So over time, the scenario is being set here that if we end up finding resistance, then definitely is setting the stage for a failed breakout, number one, and then ultimately even lower. Now, if the Dow is to continue making fresh all-time highs, it has one choice, and it has to clear both of these lines so it can advance beyond the current level. So right now we're sitting at resistance, and so until we clear that RSI topside line, then definitely one can be a little bit cautionary, not selling everything that you own, but at least understand that some things are emerging that could be stalling the market. Now we can say the same thing about the S&P 500. This is the 2-year weekly for the SPX. You can see that line there, just like we saw with the Dow. And also we can see this line here. If you extend it that way, you can see the S&P 500 has the possibility of showing similar resistance levels on the weekly RSI or breakout levels, as we discussed for that with the Dow. On the monthly for the Dow, we see finally there's a monthly breakout. So of course we are closing at a fresh all-time monthly closing high. So that's going to be the new all-time monthly closing high. So what bulls would want to see is the market to, over time on the monthly, continue adding above this level. Now we also would want to see the RSI move above 69.1 on the Dow. It has yet to do that. And if this is a true strong breakout, then the MACDs also would need to move to 3-year highs. Right now we can see the Dow is lagging as far as those minimum requirements are concerned. But this is not the biggest issue in the market. In fact, we can say it's not an issue for the market because the S&P 500 continues to hold its monthly RSI above 69.1. So that's good. So it's still above 69.1. We can see that the monthly breakout here, this is month number 3 since the breakout. But we can see that little bit of a lagging, not the worst looking MACDs, because we can see one of the MACDs is very close to 3-year highs. But remember, this is a major moving average. They tend to be a little bit slower. It's not the worst. You want to see it at 3-year highs. So in other words, it might be telling us that this move is not as strong as it might seem on the surface, because the moving averages are not at 3-year highs. But the key is the monthly RSI holding above 69.1. Same thing with the Nasdaq. Take a look at the Nasdaq monthly. Nasdaq is again on month number 3 of a breakout. Huge breakout here. If you go back a couple months at the lows here, it looked like we were headed much lower. But if you remember what I was talking about back then, I was talking about the possibility of support based on the following line, which if you're not familiar with how I look at charts might not make sense. But this line here was coming to be tested. So the fact that we found support here was no surprise, because this is where we had broken out, which began the move itself. So the move began here, bang. So we're coming back to test this level here. Now, because the level held above 50, that's another takeaway. Once we held above 50 on the monthly RSI, it meant that more than likely we're going to go back to test the highs, maybe test the highs and improve on the highs. So we did test the highs and we've actually improved on the prior highs. You can see here on the MACDs also, just now is when we are seeing the Nasdaq moving its RSI to 3-year high. So a little bit of a not very strong breakout. So that might in itself be something to watch, because if we start rolling over and the moving averages as far as the MACDs are concerned are a little bit sluggish, any stalling in the market might lead to a substantial pullback, because the quality of the breakout is not there as per our minimum requirements for the ultimate the breakout. Take a look at some of our breakout candidates. I know I've talked about Crude before, but we can see it did continue adding on to some gains this month here. So it's done well since the most recent breakout alert I sent out was in the let's call it lower to mid 40s. Stocks has gone as high as 115. So this has been a good one. And of course, it needs to settle down if it's going to have another good run. If you take a look, and it's forming take a look at the weekly, you can see the weekly has had some pullback. So any fresh breakout on the weekly, and this one could see another run. Another stock that has been on our breakout candidate, this one is a little bit choppy, but you can see the initial breakout was somewhere here, beginning of the year. It might not seem like much, but the breakout was at about 30. The stock would go on to trade as high as 57, 58. So it did gain almost double in price from that breakout. Now, since then, the other breakouts have not been as successful. You can see here a little bit of a move above the breakout level, but didn't go much higher. There's another breakout here. We can say net not the most successful. Remember, at this time period, the reason why these breakouts were struggling is that the market itself here was also pulling back. So there was a pullback in the market in this general area. Now we are seeing, I've sent some breakout alerts before the breakout. So we are anticipating a breakout at about 75. So a fresh breakout above 75 might take this higher. Remember, this is OKLO. So yeah, a fresh breakout is what we are anticipating, and that is still in play. Oh, by the way, I should point out what I'm using here to look at these stocks is I'm looking at barchart.com, and they do have a top 100 list of percentage gainers. So these are the top percentage gainers in the US markets in the last year, last 52 weeks. And a lot of these stocks are familiar to Moade.com subscribers because it's stocks that we've been playing over the last year or so. Now, another one that we've been following here is a recent mover. It's a ticker symbol is PRCH, and you can see there was a breakout here somewhere there at about 11, another breakout here at about 13, and the stock continues to move higher. Of course, we have to see whether it's going to continue moving higher. This one I've talked about before, and you can see even after talked about it last month, you can see it went on and touched a high of about 120. Remember, the breakout level was here at about 40. So 40 to 120. And it took 1, 2, 3, 4 months. So there's some stocks that are really taking off. So of course, it makes sense because the market is trading at all-time highs. Take a look at the financials. Again, we can see that yes, the market is pulling back towards the end of the month, but the XLF continues to hold its RSI above 69.1. And as long as that's the case, we have to anticipate the market being strong. Of course, with all of this, if in the new month we end up rolling over back below 69.1, watch out. That might be in itself a major sell signal. Now we take a look at VT, which tracks global markets. So this ETF represents the entire global market landscape. We can see here, this is month number 4 of a breakout. And this makes sense because the RSI did move above 69.1. And if you know how to read that, so if you know how to read this, the power of an instrument when it's above 69.1, what happens is you end up having this pickup in momentum. So it's what I call the money-making area, money-making zone. Take a look at the MACDs. We can see the MACDs for the global markets are a little bit better. We are seeing the MACDs at 3-year highs. Minimum 3-year highs is needed. So the MACDs here are okay. Is it the best? Not really. But remember, we are looking at major averages. So they tend to be a little bit slower as compared to stocks themselves. Now take a look at GLD. And of course, GLD on the monthly did have a fresh breakout. That's something that we've been following here. Fresh breakout for GLD this month, which is what the gold bulls want to see. During all of these breakouts, I've been sending out breakout alerts to my paid clients. So gold has not been a surprise move. In fact, we've been on the right side of this move, especially ever since gold moved above 69.1 last year, more than a year and many months plus. So once it moved above 69.1, we knew that gold was going to more than likely pick up momentum, which is exactly what it's doing. So that's the look there. If you take a look at GLD on the daily chart, now the daily is telling me that it won't surprise me that this is where we might start seeing a little bit of a stall point because there's a line here that has been a little bit of an issue. If you go back to where it stalled, so go back to this stall point here, and then since then, we've been tagging this area and being pushed back. Tagging this area and being pushed back. So now, is it eventually going to clear that area, or is it Is this going to be another pullback zone? So it wouldn't surprise me that that might be a little bit of a resistance area. Now, if we take a look at GDX, I remember GDX, oops, wrong ticker. So GDX has been picking up momentum. We're not surprised because the RSI again moved above 69.1 last month. I gave you another breakout alert here because of understanding the power of this RSI level. And of course, we had given another breakout alert here. In other words, we've been playing the gold mining stocks in 2025 because of the strength of the GDX, especially as it started meeting the minimum requirements for the ultimate Muad'Dib breakout. So that to me is, again, the RSIs, the MACDs are good. You can see the MACDs are definitely trading at 3-year highs. So definitely at 3-year highs. And let me show that 3-year highs here, 3-year highs, 3-year highs. So you can say that that's a market that you should have some representation. We can see here on the daily, the RSI is above 69.1. So day to day, there's a probability of higher prices or maybe a shallow pullback and higher prices. Why? Because usually you need to do something like this, and it's the negative divergence, a future negative divergence with higher prices that really starts setting the stage for a pullback. So I would say as long as the daily is above 69.1, you have to let them run. And take a look at SLV. SLV this week is showing a fresh breakout. We've been talking about this. It settled down for a couple of weeks here. And you can see last week did close above the range and this week following through. So silver is also doing its best to catch up. And you can see that the RSI is now closing for the month above 69.1. And so you can see silver stocks. And I did give out that breakout alert when it broke out here in this price. So again, that's another area of the market we've been paying attention to because of the fact that the minimum requirements seem to have been met of the RSI and MACD. So silver moving higher, it's not the biggest surprise in the world. I should point out here that I also noticed, or you'll notice that uranium stocks are doing their best to move their RSI above 69.1. So uranium stocks, depending on whether they hold above 69.1, this is another area that we are starting to pay focus on. Remember, we need a fresh weekly breakout if this is going to be a true fresh sector of a market that is going to be seeing fresh leadership. So right now, you can see this week we tried to break out, but that breakout on the weekly has not been successful. But it's something we're going to keep monitoring because if we can eventually, so right now we see that there's a failed breakout, but in time, if we end up seeing another attempt that is successful, obviously we have to pay attention and have some representation in the uranium sector. Now, if you take a look at, let's take a look at USO, and we're going to take a look at the daily for USO. And this one is hard to read. I've been saying that for a while. Things all over. We got this top side resistance this week. We're seeing it form a double top right here. And then we have another line, which is the RSI lows line. So in a way, it's a wedge with either the possibility of a breakout to really have some swing trade to the upside, or we get a breakdown and get some swing trade to the downside. Now, either we get a breakout or not, or a breakdown, I'm still not very confident it's an area we should be paying too much attention to because of the fact that we've been in this range for years. So since 2022. And remember, the top side of the monthly RSI means that as long as we are still struggling to hold above this declining RSI line on the monthly, it means that crude oil is still stuck to being sideways to down. Now, in the future, of course, it might get some movement and some strong push if the RSI can clear this top side declining line on the monthly. Now, which brings me to the cryptos. You can see BTC down about almost 5% for the week. I would say it is coming back to test the breakout there. It depends on where it closes for the week on its weekly close. So it's testing that breakout, number one. And then number two, we also have, now here's a 5-year, just went to a 5-year. But we also have this line here on the weekly RSI. So as long as this line has yet to break, I would say that it won't surprise me that eventually we start building higher, because the line that I would really say is going to be a major line if it breaks is that line, and we are not close to breaking down. That's the weekly. Now you take a look at the daily. In the daily, you can see that coming off the lows right here, we can draw a line from here, which is this RSI level. And so you can see that the market is aware of this line. We did find support here for the lows there. We found support on the line for the lows here. And now we are here. We might be breaking or might be just faking people out, because it depends on where you close. If we end up finding support on this line again, then somewhere around here, we might find support and BTC might move higher. Now remember, if that blue line fails and we are stuck below it, then definitely it would be coming back officially to test the 200-day moving average. So BTC is threatening to go down, but has yet to really break down. That's all I'm saying. Now you take a look at BTC on the monthly, and now it depends on how you want to look at this. I personally think it's a good thing that it's down for the month, because you need at least 1 month of rest before you can stage a fresh breakout with some power. So I personally, if I was bullish, I wouldn't really be complaining about the pullback. But remember, it's this line here, topside RSI line. Now we can see that that line is confirming that BTC here should have stalled, and it is stalling. So now the question becomes, is this setting up for a major pullback in BTC and the cryptos? And of course, that's the big question. And personally, I would say not yet. And to really explain that, let me take a look at a longer view. And the fact that we haven't broken below the following line gives me pause. Remember, this line has been instrumental in giving us some really interesting insights. We break down here, we go down. We recapture the line here, we go up. We find support here, as I discussed back in the day. When it had happened, we move higher. I discussed this support here, we went higher. So to me, if we are above the blue line net, we might be setting the stage for a potential future breakout. That is how I'm viewing BTC for now. These are the closing numbers, and that's it for now. Hope you have a nice long weekend. I leave you as I found you, in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator. Adonai.